everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're going to be talking with my son, Tim, about the game Warhammer Diskwars, which recently released from Fantasy Flight Games. Now, Warhammer Diskwars is based on the game Diskwars, surprisingly enough, that was released in 1999 from Fantasy Flight Games. And the difference between this game and that game isn't huge, but there are some differences. For example, in its original release, the game was something of a collectible game. All the expansions were booster packs, and you didn't always know what you were going to get. The other thing is the original game had a dexterity element where you would drop discs onto other discs for things like missile fire. They've pretty much done away with that. But to really talk about how the rest of the game works, I'm going to turn it over to Tim.
So, Warhammer Diskwars faithfully reproduces the effects of the Warhammer Fantasy Miniatures game, but in disc form. The game is very fast-paced, and casualties occur in staggering numbers on both sides of the field. Now, the way that the game works is you move your discs by flipping them end over end a number of times based on their movement stat. If you end on top of an enemy disc, then you must end your movement, and they are now engaged. At the end of the turn, all engagements get resolved during the melee phase. Alternatively, any units that have a ranged attack, like the Maiden Guard, may shoot a ranged attack against anybody in range, rolling what has replaced the manual dexterity element of the game mentioned previously with dice. And the dice of the game determine whether or not you hit, whether or not you pin the target, and whether or not you scatter with your various missiles and hit somebody else that is close by. Another thing that ends up playing a very major role in the game is the terrain, which has varying effects and gets placed by both players at the beginning of the game, just like any game of Warhammer Fantasy, as well as command cards. And the command cards have a rock, paper, scissors element that determine turn order and activation order between the players of the game, as well as determining special abilities that you get to use and how many discs you get to activate on your turn. So, one of the things that really drew me into the game was the setup portion, actually laying out the battlefield as well as army construction. And the mechanics of the games themselves are very, very fun and interesting. But what really drove the game home for me was how the game was set up. And what happens here is, after forces are created, you figure out who has initiative by rolling a die and adding numbers based on an initiative roll. And what happens is the person that goes first has a huge advantage in that they win ties and therefore have a higher chance of being able to go first and gain victory. The person that goes second has the advantage of being able to set up the battlefield. And what this means is that at the beginning of the game, a number of scenario cards, or 2 scenario cards, are going to be drawn by the player going second. And each scenario card is going to have a different special ability, of which that player is going to get to choose. And that special ability will affect the game for the rest of the game. Then, the remaining scenario cards get distributed to each player, and that determines their own personal objective, which remains secret. And most of the objectives are the same, but the possibility for players having different objectives means that the strategy is going to be different every single time you play, whether it's defensive or offensive. Now, moving on to the next portion is deployment. The player, again, that goes second, that does not have the initiative, has the option of choosing one of these deployment cards. There are going to be a number of these laid out in front of the players, and the players take turns picking which ones they want. These not only give you the limits of your deployment zone, but they also give your deployment zone a special ability based on which ones you pick, and also determines how many of your discs get to start on the battlefield. On top of that, a number of terrain cards are randomly going to be drawn for players to place on the battlefield. And the terrain cards have 2 different pieces of terrain to represent the tiles, which are double-sided. The player, again, that is going second, gets to start placing these terrain pieces, and therefore giving them a huge advantage in whether they are going to give themselves more cover or place terrain in such a way as to hinder their opponent. Basically giving it a home field advantage type of thing. And so all of that combined means that every single game is going to be different. How you set up the board is going to be different based on your force. Which scenario card you pick is also going to be based on your best advantages. So going second gives you a huge advantage because you get to set up the battlefield based on your particular strengths. But going first is still one of the hugest advantages because you win ties. You basically get to decide whether or not you're going to go first or second. And at the end of the game, if victory points are tied, you win because you are first.
All right, so you've actually played a lot more games than I have at this point. I've done 2 games, both with you, both of which you kicked my ass. So what are your feelings about the game at this point?
I am actually very, very hopeful with this game. As I said earlier, it faithfully reproduces the feel of the Warhammer Fantasy Miniatures game. One of my personal gripes with that game was how long it took, how long setup took, and how long it took to put the pieces together, and so on and so forth. This game, with setup and with teaching players, it has never lasted longer than 1 hour and 15 minutes.
Right.
So and on top of that, the game has a lot of strategy to it for being little cardboard pieces that go on a table that flip over. With how the rules work and exactly how many possibilities there are with maneuvering, with terrain setup, deployment, army construction. This game has a lot of possibilities, and with more expansions, the game ought to become very, very huge, in my opinion.
Right. And I felt the same way when we were playing. I felt like the strategy is there. It's a really interesting strategy game. And I don't know what it is, but there's just something fun about flipping the discs over when you're moving. It's both precise and imprecise because it's a curve. It's not like if it were a square, there'd be 4 ways that you could flip the thing. But it's not. It's a curve. So you could curve it this way and maybe go a little that way. And since you're not measuring distance for your move, we even had that one situation where I had my one of my chaos units was trying to go for your elf hero, and it came up just short because I had to guess how far he was going to be able to go in 5 flips. So I found that to be really interesting. On the other hand, as I was watching your game today, he was playing a 3-player game, and so there were a lot of things on the field. And I'm standing up above and looking down and realizing that I had no idea what was going on because, seeing all these things out from a distance, you can't see the pictures, you can't see the stats, and it kind of looked like a mess. And it reminded me of why it was I really enjoy playing miniatures games, because I like the visual aspect of a miniatures game. I like seeing the armies on the field. So even if I wouldn't necessarily know what's going on or who's in the best position in terms of the battle, I could still look at it and go, wow, that's awesome. That's really cool. But I don't know. What do you think about that?
I definitely did love the visual appeal of the Warhammer Fantasy game and also the Warhammer 40K game. That is probably one of the biggest draws to that game in general, is people walk into a game store and walk up to the gaming table and see hundreds of pieces on either side of the table clashing in the middle of the board, tons of dice being rolled. There's definitely something appealing seeing, especially if all the models are painted, seeing hundreds of models on the board just kind of clashing in the middle and, rolling tons and tons of dice all at once. It's very satisfying. Me personally, I'm able to imagine what is going on with this battle and truly appreciate exactly the proportions of.
No, I know what you're saying. You're essentially saying that once you're playing it, you're into it, and that's and I agree with you, because I felt that way when we were playing our games. I really knew what was going on. There weren't so many things on the board that I needed to like scrutinize every piece as I was going on. I knew that, you know, my Marauders were over here and my Blood Crushers were over there, and I knew instinctually where I wanted everybody to be at any given point and who was in trouble. And it really wasn't until I was watching the game, watching you play the game when I wasn't involved, that I realized that, you know what, I like minis, I like terrain, I like 3 dimensions. But I think when I'm playing the game, that's not going to be that much of an issue. But what about, you know, one of the things that I didn't even think about when we were playing the game, and it only was brought to my attention reading forums, and I think it was Board Game Geek in particular, but this is a constructible game. This is a game where you're going to be building your forces, and they give you, I felt like they gave you more than enough to feel like you could just play with this box and it's great and you're going to have a good time. And I guess somewhere in the rules they mentioned that you could buy another box and have more options. And that hadn't even really occurred to me that, oh yeah, actually if you have more pieces, you'll have more options and more ways that you could build your force. But I just thought it was interesting that that didn't even occur to me. It wasn't like, because in a way this reminds me of playing X-Wing, Star Wars X-Wing or Attack Wing, and mostly because it's a simple strategy game. It's played on a 3x3, but in both of those games, with the starter box, you can play it and feel like, yeah, this was fun, but now I need more stuff now, and I didn't feel that way at all with this game. So, what do you think?
I definitely don't think you need more, but the thing that kind of has me going, the itch that kind of needs to be scratched, is once I did play, I was excited to see what was going to come out next. Like, I don't necessarily feel as if I need to buy more, but I want to. And that's probably that's the trap that I end up falling into.
But that's good, though. I mean, that's good. It means that you like the game and you want more. And I don't know if there's a better recommendation for the game than saying, give me more things because I want to spend more money.
Exactly. And it's not even just that. It's, you know, you see what it is that they've done with just the core set, and the core set is more than enough to play with. Like, you've got, you know, 4 different factions that can all fight against each other. Alternatively, you can mix the orders of mix the sides of order together, High Elves and Empire, and mix destruction together, Chaos and Orcs, and then have even more possibilities for playing order against destruction. But with all of that and seeing all the possibilities in this box, it makes me wonder exactly what they're going to do with upcoming expansions.
So what do you want in upcoming expansions? What would be your choice for the thing that you want to see next?
Tomb Kings.
Bretonnians. Do you know why I want Bretonnians?
Why?
Because I could never paint a Bretonian army. Too many minis, too much color, too much going on, but I always want to play them. So
that makes sense. That is a lot. That makes a lot of sense.
So anything else?
I think that this is an awesome game and everybody should own it.
Cool. Well, thanks for joining us for this first father-son edition of, I don't even know what the hell this is called. Whatever it is. Game review. I have no specific name for this. But yeah, anyway, thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
It's going to be a little annoying in your ears,